I tested the 3 original combat styles that got some huge updates with the Evolution of Combat update. That came out about a week ago, and I ranked them for you from easiest to hardest, and which one that you should maybe pick up if you want to kill those bosses, and if you maybe don't want to use Necromancy. Because, a little disclaimer before we start, I still think that Necromancy is by far the easiest combat style, simply because this combat style has everything in it. You have damage, you have sustain, you have a lot of support abilities and stuff, and I really think that if you just want to have a chill and fun time in Gielinor, just pick up Necromancy. You got everything in it that you need, and you will have, I think, the easiest time in your life, and easier than with the other 3 combat styles. But yet still, I played all 3 combat styles and rank them for you. But before we start with the ranking, I think we have to talk about on how I rank them. Because I think there are two main points on how you can rank a combat style of how easy or how hard it is at the moment. The one that I ranked is basically on how difficult does this combat style feel when you simply have no experience with it, pick it up and start killing bosses. And then I think there is another difficulty on how hard is it to master the combat style. And yet I have not mastered the 3 combat styles, so therefore I am not able to, basically rank on how hard I think this is. But as I already mentioned, I tested all 3 of them, and I can definitely give you a ranking on how hard is it to pick it up and just start killing some bosses. So the question is, how did I test it? It is pretty simple. For all the combat styles, I had some gear. For once, I had better gear. For others, the gear was more scuffed. But then I took my gear that I had for the combat style and took them to the same 5 bosses all the time. So I started with Vindicta and also Vindicta hard mode, because this boss is basically just a it feels like a damage dummy, to be honest, and is there to get a little bit a feel of the combat style itself. Then I went to Araxor, my beloved spider boss. After that, I went to the Arc Glacier at least 100 in rage. Then Raksha, and finally the Sanctum of Rebirth hard mode. Because I still think the Sanctum of Rebirth hard mode is one of the hardest solo encounters that we have in the game. And especially if you are not familiar with the combat style at all, and then you have to avoid all these area effects and mechanics and so on. I think the hard mode Sanctum of Rebirth, and especially Nakatra in the end, is a real tough challenge. So therefore, I used all combat styles for exactly these 5 bosses, and I can spoil you, I was able to kill all bosses with all the combat styles, which was something that I at least did not expect to be able to do so. Okay, so now let's start with the one that I thought is the easiest just to pick up, and this was actually, to my big surprise, ranged. I mean, I made a little voting on my channel, and the most people think that range is the hardest combat style and melee is the easiest one, and this can be maybe true, especially when we talk about mastering the combat style. But for just picking it up and defeating some bosses, ranged actually felt the easiest to me. I mean, just to be clear, I had some really scuffed gear in range. So my armor was basically Serenic, so a tier 90 power. Same goes for my gloves and boots, I think. Then I had a Eldritch crossbow, which was not even a bow, even though we have a bow meta. I used a Reaver's ring, and then a Sack Cape, an Essence of Finality, without a ranged special attack stored into it. So therefore, my combat setup was really scuffed and really old. But yet still, I took them out with some Criminal Bolts. I most of the time just camped the Onyx Criminal Bolts for the heal effect, simply because I was so used to having that heal in my kit with Necromancy that it felt better than using a damage bolt. But yeah, I took that scuffed gear out of my bank, and with that scuffed gear, I was actually able to defeat everything without really having trouble. I mean, I wasn't fast at all. Don't get me wrong here. I think it took me over 3 minutes to defeat the Arc Glacier at 221 in rage. It took me 8.5 minutes for the Sanctum of Rebirth hard mode kill. And for Kazalem also almost 8 minutes, so I was really slow. But the task of completing the boss instance, I was able to do it. And I was able to do it without any trouble. I mean, I think I even first tried the Sanctum, if I'm not completely wrong with my memories here, which is just absolutely insane if you ask me. So therefore, I think range is pretty simple to pick up. And I think you can also see the simplicity of the skills a little bit at their, I call it, adrenaline gaining ability, because all three combat styles have a ability that basically generates adrenaline for them. For Mage, it's Tsunami, for Melee, it's Meteor Strike, and for ranged, it's Imbue Shadow. And the ranged one is pretty simple. Always when you can, you just activate it, and after that, all your projectiles will generate adrenaline, which has a extremely good synergy with Great Ricochet and also with Rapid Fire, for example. So therefore, it was really simple to have a lot of adrenaline in my fights and dish out some damage via using Death Swiftness, Snapshot, and Rapid Fire, of course. So pretty easy to pick up, pretty easy to understand, and pretty easy to dish out enough damage to get all the boss instances down. Okay, at second place, I actually have Melee, which was also a big surprise for me, because I thought that Melee is not possible for me with a scuffed gear to kill all these bosses. But actually, with Melee, and I again had some tier 90 power armor, my weapon was actually a Noxious Scythe, so also a tier 90 weapon. I used the Reverse Ring and Essence of Finality without a melee special attack in it, so pretty scuffed all in all. And even with that gear, I was able to kill all the bosses. And I gotta say that Melee feels kinda overtuned a bit at the moment. At least I thought so, because sometimes I was able to dish out some incredible damages. And I think I was also faster in a lot of boss instances with Melee than with range. Especially at the easier bosses, for example, Vindicta, I was pretty fast with Melee. I mean, Vindicta normal mode was done in 34 seconds, and with range the same kill took me 45 seconds. So therefore, I think Melee is kinda overtuned and insane at the moment. And especially when you go into high-end gear and you have this armor of Havoc shenanigans and a Aztec kill and all that stuff, which has some incredible set bonus, some incredible benefits, and some incredible special attacks. I think Melee is incredible at the moment, and also really easy to pick up. But I also had to learn, and this is basically the reason why I ranked it as harder than range, that you still have this incredible downside of being in melee range. And when I then came to the Sanctum of Rebirth hard mode, I had trouble, and I had a lot of trouble, especially with the fact that I basically had to be in melee range and then also dodge these area effect attacks from Nakatra. I also died a few times to the sheer stupid mechanic of when you press an ability and try to dive away in the same tick, that you only can dive as far as your ability range goes or something. It looked pretty weird, actually. And therefore, I was not able to dive out of the area effects and all that stuff. So it had some real downsides. And especially Nakatra took me, quite a few tries to get her done. But this was not because the combat style was bad or the damage was too low or anything. And rather just simply because I was not able to do it. And because being in melee range constantly is just basically what makes melee hard at the moment. So therefore, I think melee is pretty easy to pick up. I think it was never that easy like it is now, you know? But still, the fact that you have to be in melee range for every boss just makes it not the easiest, and is still quite a challenge depending on which boss encounter you want to go on. But again, we also can look at the adrenaline generating ability, which is Meteor Strike. And this basically reads that when you use it for 30 seconds, 4.5% adrenaline every game tick. So basically, you use Meteor Strike, and after that, you constantly generate adrenaline. It feels like constantly having a adrenaline renewal potion on or something. It's just absolutely absurd to me how easy it was to always stay at a high adrenaline level. So I just pressed Meteor Strike, and after that I spammed out my ultimates, my enhanced abilities like nothing, and I never had any trouble with my adrenaline at all. So pretty insane, pretty easy, and pretty OP. But now let's come to the hardest combat style. And this was actually Mage. And this surprised me a lot because before the combat update, I was sure that I want to learn Mage. I was also always fascinated by Mage, and I had zero experience with Mage. And then I picked it up, I bought some gear and stuff, and I simply had trouble. And it was hard. And it was not hard because I was in melee range or something. It was just simply hard because I dealt no fucking damage. Because first, I had to look up how to really deal damage with Mage, because basically everything is around critting all the time. And I really think that Mage is at the moment, at least I think, the combat style that feels like is most reliant on good gear than the other combat styles at the moment. Because by now I have a full Tumikin set gear. I also learned how actually the abilities work and how some combos work with Mage. And now I am pretty fast and pretty strong with the combat style, almost on a similar level like with Best in Slot Necromancy. But to achieve this, I really had to spend a lot of time with Mage. I had to look up how the abilities work. I had to read through the abilities. I had to understand how the combos work. And I think it's the combat style that is just the hardest to just simply pick up. I think you can also see it at the adrenaline generating ability, which is Tsunami. And after you cast Tsunami, you don't generate adrenaline just naturally, passively. You don't get it for just every projectile that you throw, and rather you simply only get extra adrenaline when you crit. So therefore you also have to crit to be able to generate adrenaline, which also means that if you have a low crit chance, for example, you don't have any crit enhancing gear or anything, you have a 10% crit chance in the kit, and this basically means that your adrenaline generating ability just sucks compared to the other ones. Obviously, when you then boost your crit to 40-50% almost and stuff, this becomes pretty OP, but just picking up the combat style and then going versus bosses with it, Mage was definitely the hardest. And I still believe that Mage is not the beginner friendliest at the moment. When we then talk about mastering the skill, I think it's a whole different story. And as far as I know, because I haven't mastered the 3 combat styles yet, but as far as I know, ranged is still pretty hard to master at the highest level. Melee at the moment is a bit overtuned, so therefore definitely easier, but Mage will be easier than, for example, ranged to master the combat style. And I also mentioned now I'm a few days in, I read some abilities, and I get to similar results like with Necromancy before, a combat style that I played for years now. So I think when we talk about mastering abilities, it's a whole different story. But as I mentioned, for me, it was just this picking up the combat style, running at a boss and killing it. And with Mage, this was a horrible experience at first. So there you have it. This is basically my ranking. And I think when we look at the update as a whole, I think it was a incredible success. Because I mentioned I was able to pick up all 3 combat styles and I was able to defeat bosses, even in scuffed gear. So this basically means that now, whenever I want to start, for example, a new account, I can choose which combat style that I want to use, and I don't have to use Necromancy all the time. But it is still a pretty good option because it is easy to use, easy to farm, and has some incredible benefits to it. So I think at the moment the combat styles feel really great. Melee is maybe a little bit overtuned, but let's see if Jagex maybe nerfs something or buffs something. I don't know in what direction they want to go, but yet still I had a lot of fun, and I think the last week was almost the most I played RuneScape like ever. I played so much RuneScape. I basically went to work, came home, started my computer and went into that game. I had such a blast. It felt like leagues all over again and stuff. So therefore, I really think the update was a big success. And I hope that you guys had some fun too. Let me know in the comments what you think is the easiest combat style and maybe what combat style you picked up now. And now I hope that I see you in my next video. Have a great day. See ya then and bye.